Hi everyone, it's Leslie of Leslie Writes It All again with another watercolor holiday tutorial for my Strathmore Artist series. Today we'll be working with the Strathmore watercolor cards. These are watercolor paper that's already been cut and scored, so it's nice and easy for you to make a card. I will be using this Daler-Rowney Aquafine watercolor paint set, and it comes with 24 colors, and I'm just holding up this travel palette because it has the same colors in it. It's just a more compact version of that. If you're a beginner, I highly recommend getting the traveler set because it does come with a brush as well. For the brush, I'm using a Princeton Velvetouch in a size 4. Honestly, whatever brush size you have available, you can use a 3 as well, just on the smaller side. And then don't forget, a pencil and a kneaded eraser are really helpful tools as well when you're watercoloring. Lastly, I'm using a Strathmore watercolor travel pad as kind of some side paper for me to use when I'm practicing before I commit to putting everything onto the card.
So I think it's perfectly fine to eyeball it, especially since these are handmade cards. They're not meant to look perfectly or digitally drawn. But if you are having a hard time, sometimes drawing a circle helps, or if you have a compass or a protractor that helps measure angles, just take 360 divided by 6, and each piece should be about a 60-degree angle. Otherwise, like I said, just eyeballing it should be fine. Once you have the 6 sides drawn out, you can go ahead and use a kneaded eraser to lighten the markings. It'll still be visible to you. It's hard to see on camera, but I can see the pencil markings pretty clearly. You're going to use that as a guide to watercolor on top of. And from here, we're going to create just fun designs for our snowflakes. If you've never painted snowflakes or drawn them before, it would be a great idea to take a look on the internet. It'll give you some ideas on how to paint or visually like what some snowflakes might look like. I just like adding kind of fun shapes to the sides. You're going to make sure to make these symmetrical. Not all 6 sides have to be the same. You can have fun with it if you wanted to do 3 sides the same and then the other corresponding 3 sides in a different way. That's totally up to you to use your artistic license. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm making each spoke of the snowflake identical. You can see as I'm doing this practice snowflake that I'm not using just one color. I love that the beauty of watercolors is that the paint interacts with each other, especially when wet. So I like to create visual interest by adding different shades of blues. There's a little bit of green in there as well. And you can definitely take license with the colors. This is just a very fun, whimsical watercolor snowflake painting. It's not realistic, so just have fun and choose the colors that you want for this project. I'll be switching it up here with some purples and some pinks, just to give you an idea of what alternate color snowflakes might look like. And again, I'm changing up the design. I'm just going to add little dots, other stray lines on here, and just make sure that they match correspondingly to the other sides, and try to space it out as evenly as possible. And because these are more whimsical snowflakes, I'm just adding a few design elements that might not really exist in nature, like just putting a few dots in between these the spokes of the snowflake. And when you feel like you've gotten enough practice, we can go ahead and take out our watercolor cards. Like I mentioned earlier, these are cut already and scored, so they are watercolor paper that you can paint directly on and put into an envelope and mail out. I like to flatten the card completely so it's fully extended and underneath the palette. Then I'm going to take my pencil and just kind of sketch the lettering and the placement of the snowflakes. You can choose to have the lettering done, right in the center like I did, off to the corner on one side, or however you like it to be placed, and then just plan the snowflakes to go around it. Again, a kneaded eraser is a great tool for lightening the markings of the pencil so that you can see them, but they're not really that visible after you add the paint on. I'm using a technique here called brush lettering. You'll notice that with the round brush, I can achieve both thin and thicker lines. So on these upstrokes, I'm forming thinner lines, and on the downstrokes, I'm adding a little bit more pressure and creating a thicker line, and that's going to give you a brush lettering effect. If you have any questions about that, you can just always look up brush lettering or brush lettering calligraphy, and there are so many resources out there that can help you with that as well. As you can see, I'm again changing up so that it's not all in one color. I'm adding some blues and greens, and that's going to be the color motif for this card. And now I'm going to sketch out these snowflakes. I tend to plan where I'm going to put the larger ones first. Those are going to be more focal points. The larger snowflakes are going to be able to get more detail because there's just more area to paint on. So I like to plan around those first. I'm trying to vary up the size, the shape, and the directionality of the snowflakes just to make it a little more interesting. And once I have all the snowflakes that I'm planning to paint placed, I'm just going to fill it in with a few just dots. So I'm going to have some hollow circles and some filled in circles just all around to kind of fill in the spaces that maybe aren't large enough for a snowflake, but could use some detailing. And once you're satisfied with your pencil markings, go ahead and use that kneaded eraser to roll over the pencil markings to lighten that for you. It still will be visible while you paint, but not as noticeable after the paint has dried. And now let's get to our first snowflake. As you're painting these, because there's such fine details with each individual snowflake, I just want to remind you to don't use too much water when you're mixing your colors. I always mix onto the palette and not directly into each little paint set. So you want to use the palette to kind of get to the color that you want, and then you're going to take off any excess water, and that's going to let you be able to control your brush a little bit better with fine details. So it's always handy to keep some paper towels close by just to absorb some of the extra water. It also can help pick up water off the page if you do notice that you've created a blob because you pulled too much water onto your brush. But I think things that are handmade and hand painted have a beautiful imperfect quality to it. Sometimes, like, we're human, we're not computers or machines, so I love that there's details that might not perfectly align or might not be, exactly centered. And that's okay with me. I don't know if it is with you, but I've accepted kind of the beauty in imperfection. So I do love painting with kind of a more free style because of that. And the whole point of these tutorials is to really just encourage people to try art if they've never done it before, and to learn different skills, but have fun in the process. So I really hope you do get that from these projects. And I love that Strathmore invites different artists to kind of show everyone their own styles of doing things. So I'm really happy to be here and show you different ways that I paint. I really love like a easy and simple way of painting, but I think adding different elements together makes things look maybe a little bit more complicated than they really are. But when you break down this project, it's basically, a six-sided snowflake that, just has little shapes and things coming off of each spoke. So breaking it down, hopefully it's not as intimidating for anyone who hasn't tried watercoloring before. And obviously this takes practice. This is not my first time painting, and it's probably not even my 100th. Like, it's probably in the thousands of times painting. So don't feel intimidated. That's not the intention of these projects. I just want you to know that more difficult things can be broken down into simpler shapes. So hopefully that will encourage a beginner to give it a shot. And because I don't paint in a realistic way, I love adding whimsy to whatever I'm painting. So you can see I'm adding these kind of floating elements inside a snowflake. They're not touching the snowflake. So obviously this doesn't really exist in nature. But we're painting and we're only limited by imagination. So I'm having fun with it. So my style is very free and whimsical, and I also love exploring a lot of color. So that's why I love this Daler-Rowney set. It has 24 colors, but when you mix and add water, your color combinations are pretty infinite. So I love that I can make tons of different colors with this, and they're bright and vibrant and really just happy colors. So you'll notice in this holiday series, I don't traditionally stick to a red and green holiday palette, but I do love exploring rainbows and bright colors as well. I'll show you the process of how I fill out the rest of the snowflakes, but the process is pretty similar to what we covered in the beginning tutorial. So just feel free to, look up different snowflake shapes, see what inspires you, change your combinations, create your own style of painting. For the smaller snowflakes, I would just advise less intricate designs because of how small they already are. It's going to be difficult to add more patterns without it getting kind of squished in because of the space limitations. So I would save more intricate designs for the larger snowflakes and then keep the smaller ones a little more simple. And I'm sorry I didn't mention before, but now that I'm looking at these colors, it reminds me that when you're choosing colors for this particular design, I would stay with colors that are very close to each other. Like I wouldn't choose, colors that are complementary. I would stick with colors that are adjacent to each other in the color wheel. So for instance, I'm using blues and greens. They're very close to each other on the color wheel. I wouldn't use like blue and orange. Those are complementary colors, so when they mix together they cancel out and make kind of a brownish color. So because watercolors are really beautiful when they touch, you just want to choose colors that don't muddle each other up. So things that are so if you never had an experience with color before, I would look up color wheels so that you can familiarize yourself with which colors might go better with each other than others. And if you're new to painting, color theory is so important that I would dedicate like weeks to understanding color in your palette before you actually start painting. And I actually find so much joy from exploring colors. Also just see what color does
purple and green make, or orange and blue. You might be surprised, depending on how much orange or how much blue you add, or how much water you add, what kind of colors you'll get. So these 24 colors actually can make thousands and thousands of different colors. So it's worth the time to really explore and understand your palette before you dive into painting. So again, I'm just exploring different types of shapes for these snowflakes. I'm keeping each one individually different because they say no two snowflakes are the same. So this one I'm starting with a hollow circle in the center with the spokes coming out of it, and then I'll create a design from there. And you can see each time I'm just kind of dipping my paintbrush into the color and picking up very little of it. So these watercolor little pans actually last so long because you're supposed to pick up some color, mix it with water, and just let it rehydrate and dry up, and rehydrate and dry up. So you're never really wasting any paint. You're just gonna keep reusing it by re-wetting that. So I never use color directly from the pan. It's just like too pigmented. So I always kind of get some of the color off of the brush onto the palette itself. So from the pan to the palette to your paintbrush, and then the paper. And then with this snowflake, I don't know, I just decided to add kind of like, looks like flower petals in the center, and then these like leaf shapes on the outside. I just kind of made them pointy. So the good thing about these round brushes is you actually can have a lot of control over how large your brush strokes are, and it has a lot to do with the amount of pressure that you use on your when you're painting. So with finer details, you want to use a very light touch, and then if you wanted to cover a larger area with paint, then you're going to push down and put a little more pressure on the tip of your brush there, so that more of that brush makes contact with the paper. I would say if you're new to painting, or even if you're, been doing it for a while, one of the most difficult things to get right is spacing. You can tell one of the sides of that previous snowflake is slightly longer than the others, and that's okay. Again, like I said, most people, when they receive a card like this, are just like impressed that you painted, and like no one's really looking at all the details. I feel like a lot of times artists are our own worst critics, and we're the harshest on ourselves, and judge more with closer attention to detail all the things that have gone wrong with the painting. But I hope that things like that don't deter you. I think that just getting up and creating something is really beautiful. So no matter where you are in your progress, just make sure that you appreciated the fact that you are putting yourself out there. Putting your creativity on a page is really difficult sometimes, and you should really congratulate yourself for even trying. When you're getting close to being done, it's important to take a step back and look and see what might be missing, or what else you can add to the painting itself.
And this next step is totally optional, but if you wanted to add a little bit of metallic detailing, if you have gold paint or even just a gold gel pen, I just wanted to add a little bit extra something to give it a little shimmer. But again, totally optional, and it just very minimally adds a little bit more to the painting. So that's really up to you if you would like to add this. But you can see that these are the finishing touches, and this card is ready to be addressed to someone with a message and mailed out. It fits perfectly in these envelopes that come with the Strathmore set. So let me know if you guys get to painting it.